Good evening. Welcome to Newsmakers by NTD Television and the Epoch Times. Tonight, I'm your host, Paul Graney. It's great to see you. It's official. The next 2 years are going to be wild. We get to go through it all once again. America's 45th President Donald Trump is now bidding to become its 47th. The saga continues, and the attacks have already started. Stick with us because we have an exclusive interview with one of Trump's right-hand men, Devin Nunes, in just a few minutes. But let's first take a quick look at last night's event at Mar-a-Lago. Here's President Trump.
We do love our country, isn't it? That's why we're here. I didn't need this. I had a very nice, easy life. This is something I didn't need, and a lot of you people don't need either. But we love our country, and we have to take care of our country. We have to save our country.
Throughout today's show, we're going to look at everything standing in the way of another Trump presidency. Former Trump attorney Jenna Ellis will be here to talk about what she sees as the establishment GOP's apparent suicide mission against the MAGA movement. In Mar-a-Lago last night, Trump didn't call out any Republicans by name. In fact, he didn't criticize the Republican Party at all. But on the run-up to the announcement, he did criticize Senator Mitch McConnell online for choices he made about the election. McConnell was confirmed as Senate Minority Leader today in a 37-10 vote. Well, he was given the nod at least, not confirmed just yet. Here's what he said asked about Trump's announcement.
The way I'm going to go into this presidential primary season is to stay out of it. I don't have a dog in that fight. I think it's going to be a highly contested nomination fight with other candidates entering, and it's all going to be quite good for you all to cover.
But other Republican lawmakers throwing their weight behind Trump today. Senator Tommy Tuberville saying he's backing him 100%, saying we need someone like Trump to navigate an all but certain recession. Congressman Byron Donalds saying despite all the negative press Trump's been getting from all sides, it seems, since the election, that he's still the leader in the clubhouse.
President Trump's record is his record. We all know he knows how to run the country. It is without question, anybody who questions that wasn't paying attention to where America was and where America is today. But what people are looking for is what is his tone? How is he going to manage himself through this process? I thought he started off great last night. If this is what you see from Donald Trump for 16 months, he's going to be president again.
Many Republicans say it doesn't matter who the candidate is because they no longer have faith in America's election system. Later in the show, we'll talk to Cleta Mitchell. She's a former state rep, now the chairman of the Election Integrity Network. We're going to ask, do Republicans need to embrace things like ballot harvesting and getting out the early vote? Do they have a choice, even though they don't really like those processes? At last night's announcement, Trump promised to demand voter ID, same-day voting, and only paper ballots. So once again, buckle up. It's going to be a wild 2 years. And joining us now to discuss yesterday's announcement is former Congressman Devin Nunes. Nunes is now the CEO of Trump Media and Technology Company, which includes Truth Social, of course. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
Paul, great to be with you today. Thank you.
Congressman, you were at the event last night. I want to play this clip from President Trump.
We will be resisted by the combined forces of the establishment, the media, the special interests, the globalists, the Marxist radicals, the woke corporations, the weaponized power of the federal government, the colossal political machines, the tidal wave of dark money, and the most dangerous domestic censorship system ever created by man.
Devin, how did the people at the event last night feel about facing this type of pressure?
Well, a lot of the people that were at the event last night are people, they were from all over the country. They have been people who have backed President Trump for many, many years, so a lot of them are used to it. What you saw last night was more President Trump laying out his vision for the future. And it was definitely a different tone if you had watched any of his rallies leading up to the midterms. And I thought it was a clear break from the midterms. I mean, he says, look, I'm running for president. Here's what I want to do. The only thing he did say is that Herschel Walker needs to win in Georgia, and he's going to do everything that he can along with the other, I think, Republicans across the country to see if they can win one more Senate seat.
Why was there that change in tone?
Well, I would just say that my guess is, I don't know, because I wasn't involved in any of the speech writing or anything of that nature, so it's just my guess. But look, this is no longer about the midterm election. This is about 2024. And President Trump is now applying or reapplying to be the president of the United States again. So he has to lay out a crystal clear, positive vision about what he's going to do to fix these problems in America. And I think stating the obvious, which that litany, that long list of a cast of characters throughout the United States of America that have really done a lot of harm to America. So I think it's a positive vision pointing out these are the people that are going to oppose us.
Well, on that point, the president talked about dismantling the deep state and restoring government of the people. You, of course, were involved or played a key role in uncovering a plot against President Trump the first time he ran. What should people be watching for this time around?
Well, you know, the key is really going to come down to the Republicans have a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. But with that comes subpoena power. And they have a responsibility to this country to try to get to the bottom of a whole host of these problems within the so-called deep state. I mean, really what it is, it's the Department of Justice working with the Obama administration, continuing working with the left, and then now with the Biden administration to weaponize the Justice Department and use the intelligence agencies. Most importantly, it's the FBI that they've used to weaponize this process. And probably nothing, probably the clearest point last night, and I think President Trump made a clear statement on it by announcing his presidency from Mar-a-Lago and pointing out this is the very place these intelligence agencies, the DOJ and the FBI, did an unprecedented raid on his home. And I think, he didn't tell me that, but I think he wanted to basically stamp this down and say, look, enough is enough. So Congress, Republicans in Congress have got to get to the bottom of this. And it's not just in all of these issues run together. I mean, you mentioned the Russia hoax that we uncovered when I was in Congress, but the Russia hoax led to the Ukraine impeachment hoax. It led to everything that happened with the Hunter Biden laptop. It led to, conspiracy between the FBI and DOJ and what we find out now between these big tech companies. It led to now what it appears like January 6th, where the FBI director wouldn't ask the other day how many FBI agents were in the nation's capital or people that were being paid by the FBI as informants. These are all issues that then led to an unprecedented raid on a former president of the United States home at Mar-a-Lago. So the Republicans have a lot of work to do in Congress to try to get as many facts and expose them. They're not going to be able to, it's going to be the same problem we had. They don't have guns, they don't have badges, they can't go and arrest people, but they can issue subpoena after subpoena after subpoena like we did back in 17 and 18 and expose all this corruption to the American people. And, and I just want to say that this president, President Trump, no one has ever faced this type of nonsense and tyranny that comes from his own government, starting when he had his own government surveilling him and ultimately us, if you're a Republican and our party establishment. That all started in 2016 and never stopped and hit, and I don't even know if this is the end, but raiding his home at Mar-a-Lago, going through his kid's closet, going through his wife's closet. These are scary times, something that you would expect from dictatorships in third world countries. You wouldn't expect it in the United States of America. And I think it's probably the number one issue. Now, look, I'm having been involved in this and having seen this corruption so close, to me, it's the number one issue that's out there is depoliticizing the justice system in this country. There's nothing more important than that. Yes, energy independence is important. Yes, the economy is important. Yes, healthcare is important. All these things are important, but nothing is more important than this criminalization that has occurred in our justice system here in the United States of America.
Congressman Devin Nunes, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
Strong words from Mr. Nunes. Coming up after the break, Jenna Ellis, former senior advisor and counsel to President Trump, joins us to discuss what she thinks is behind the recent effort within the GOP to oust Trump as the leader of the party. Stick around to find out what Ellis has to say after the break. Welcome back. Is the Republican Party united enough to take on the Democrats in 2 years? If Trump is the chosen candidate, will he get the backing he needs? The rift between Trump and GOP leader Mitch McConnell is nothing new, but it isn't getting any better. Take the past midterms as an example. McConnell spent millions of dollars to help Lisa Murkowski in a race against Kelly Tshibaka in Alaska. Both are Republicans, it's just that one really likes Trump and the other one really doesn't like Trump. McConnell backed the one that doesn't. Republicans say that was $10 million that could have helped Trump-backed Blake Masters in Arizona, who got $0 from McConnell. In fact, a recent op-ed, former Trump attorney Jenna Ellis says it's high time someone asked the question as to whether the GOP intentionally threw some of these races just so they could hold Trump over the fire. Lucky for us, we can ask Ms. Ellis herself that question. Joining us now is Jenna Ellis, Epoch Times contributor and former senior advisor and counsel to President Trump. Jenna, thanks so much for coming on.
Great to see you, Paul. Thank you.
Jenna, that op-ed and what it kind of hinted at was pretty shocking. Do you really feel that some in the GOP will be so desperate to get rid of Trump that they would risk their own political power?
Absolutely, and the reason for that is because their political power hinges on ousting Donald Trump. And we are back exactly to 2016, where President Trump is the billionaire outsider who loves America. He's coming in to drain the swamp. He has spoken out against what myself and Raheem Kassam are calling the McLeadership. I also call them the McMorons, all of Ronna McDaniel, Kevin McCarthy, and Mitch McConnell, and he still wants to drain the swamp. So they know that their power hinges on making sure that Donald Trump doesn't get back into office so that he does not finish what he started.
But then that means Trump has the media to deal with, the Democrats to deal with, the deep state to deal with, now the GOP to deal with. How does he get through this? This seems incredible.
Yeah, well, the same way that he did in 2016, which is to simply continue telling the truth, and he will continue to be that outsider. And he has the support of the American people. He has the support of the base. And what he doesn't have right now, interestingly, is the support of a lot of the donors. And so what we're seeing is that the high-powered donor class of the GOP is starting to go elsewhere because they are buying the narrative from the GOP, which really is just DNC light, that we have to get back to the establishment era because Trump is too controversial, or Trump is an insurrectionist, or all of these other narratives of these hoaxes that we've seen since 2016. And I hope that everyone will see through that, and we will draw, Paul, the appropriate lines, not between Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and some of these others that are truly America first, but draw the line against America first, against the establishment. That is what we saw with the momentum of Donald Trump and what we see with the momentum truly of the America First movement.
How about the base, Jenna? Because the media is one thing and Trump's opponents are another thing. Okay, they've been attacking Trump since 2015, 2016. There do seem to be some influential conservatives on Twitter, at least, you know, who've perhaps turned their back very suddenly on the president. Does this concern you at all?
It does, because I think they're fair weather friends. And unfortunately, a lot of conservative influencers are now buying the mainstream media's narrative and their lies that somehow this movement is over and we need to go back to kind of this milquetoast GOP. And I don't think that's going to work genuinely with the base, but that has been the lie and the narrative from the mainstream media. But this is why other alternative outlets like the Epoch Times are so important, because we need to continue telling the truth. And the truth is that the American people and the true America First base do not want to go backwards. They don't want to go back to being beholden to the swamp. And what Donald Trump did in 2016 and what he did for 4 years in office is showed how America truly can become again the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and how he can truly keep his promises and get things done. We don't want to go backwards. And so while the fake news media can talk all they want, Donald Trump is going to continue to tell the truth. I think Ron DeSantis and others will continue to tell the truth, and that is going to be the battle between the base, who are patriots and who are Americans and who care, versus the swamp that is just all about control. And interestingly also, Paul, what we've seen from the FTX scandal is that this isn't just Democrats who've taken this potentially money laundering scandal. We're still kind of finding out those details, but if there's any truth to that, we also have to look at the filings from Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell and the minority congressional and Senate leadership fund, they also took money from FTX. So we have to, as conservatives, hold everyone in the swamp accountable. That means the establishment GOP and the Democrats.
That's incredible. It's been incredible fallout from the FTX. Jenna, while I have you here, 2 years ago, I'm sure you remember, we were following you as closely as we were following anyone as you traveled to hearings about election irregularities across the country. What is your sense of how things went this cycle?
Well, we have a lot of hope. I think a lot of things did change, and we've seen that there have been a lot of momentum in terms of election integrity, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. What we're seeing from a lot of the Republicans who thought that there were some election integrity issues that we still need to address, their concerns are very valid, and so the questions still need to be answered. But when we have states that still have legalized ballot harvesting, when they're still legalizing universal vote by mail, like my home state of Colorado that's had this since 2012, we have to, as Republicans and as conservatives and even as independents, we need to make sure that we are still fighting on that same playing field, because if we give up and we just say, well, we only should be voting in person, then we have all of these challenges like what we saw in Arizona that end up disenfranchising potentially tens of thousands of voters. There's still a lot of work to be done, but the hope here, Paul, is that we have seen a lot of work that was done since 2020. We did not see the same level of corruption as we saw in 2020.
30 seconds, Jenna. You were in Pennsylvania with Mastriano. Are you surprised with how things played out there? Again, about 30 seconds.
Yeah, not really, because again, Karl Rove, who's part of the Swamp GOP, his super PAC that he founded actually put hundreds of millions of dollars into attack ads against Mastriano that was lifting up Josh Shapiro. And so this is just one example of how the Swamp wants to maintain their own power, and they're willing to tank America First candidates and have Democrats. Why? So that they can simply fundraise. And that should not be how Washington works, because it's not working for you and me.
Shocking. Jenna Ellis, Epoch Times contributor. Thank you, Jenna. Until next time.
Thank you, Paul.
There you go. Coming up after a quick break, stay with us. Why did it all take so long for Arizona's ballots to be counted? And why, despite the pandemic being over, are there still so many mail-in ballots? Cleta Mitchell, she's the woman to tell us. She's the chairwoman of the Election Integrity Network. She joins us in just a moment to discuss those election laws and how this could be part of a broader strategy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Democrats across the country have been making it easier to vote in the elections, especially since the pandemic began, but even before that, regulations were loosened and new innovations like mail-in ballots, early voting, and even fighting to keep elections voter ID free were all advanced by the Dems. This, of course, came as dismay to the Republicans. They don't like these policies. They say making our elections unsecure is not a good idea, or that it's even making a joke of our elections here. It can now take weeks to get the results in some parts of the country, so naturally, conservatives want these policies to be outlawed so that maybe we can go back to a time when we knew the results on election night with little reason to doubt the process. But wishing is one thing. You need to be empowered to make these changes, and to do that, you got to win elections. That's why there's a growing number of Republicans calling on the GOP to adopt these policies, use them, take power, and then abolish the policies. It's kind of what Ron DeSantis did in Florida. Look at the result for the GOP there. And joining us live to discuss this idea is Cleta Mitchell, Senior Legal Fellow at the Conservative Partnership Institute and Chairwoman of the Election Integrity Network. She's been on the ground across the country trying to shore up our elections and restore faith in the process. Cleta, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Cleta, before we get to the election strategy part of the discussion, what's your feeling about the integrity of our elections this cycle?
Well, I think that that's deplorable in so many ways, in so many states. And remember, these elections are not national, they're state by state. And what the left has done is they've spent many billions of dollars, I'm serious, billions over the last decade, changing the election systems to make access the primary goal, which means that they've loosened all the provisions that protect the secret ballot, protect vulnerable voters from political pressure, and make it less likely that our elections are fair and honest and actually reflect the will of the people.
I think Arizona is a case in point. We're waiting, with bated breath for a week, over a week now, to get the results there. This is a place where they have made this shift, over the past 6 to 8 years. Can you maybe use this as a case study to go through what exactly they've done here to draw out this process?
Look, Maricopa County and the state of Arizona has been increasingly problematic for more than 6 years. I represented former U.S. Congressman J.D. Hayworth in the 2006 election, and he was waiting for 100,000 ballots to be counted more than a month after the election, which he ultimately lost. But it took a month for that. That was 2006. In 2020, we know that the president of the Arizona Senate called for an audit of Maricopa County because she was concerned that 11% of the ballots had to be adjudicated by hand because they couldn't be read by the tabulator. Guess what that number is this year? It's not 11%, it's 15%. Incredible. It was 2% in 2018. And the guys who presided over that election 2 years ago, who did everything they could to sabotage the audit, which Senator Karen Fann was trying to make sure didn't happen again. They undermined that audit. Guess who was in charge of running the election this year? Those very people. So
are these the people, Cleta? Are these the people who have this pack for raising money to oppose
Yes.
MAGA candidates? This is just incredible.
Yes.
We're talking about laws here. Are there no laws to safeguard people's perception of the elections, at least?
Well, there are laws, and there's actually an election integrity unit in the Office of the Attorney General of Arizona. But guess what? The Attorney General ran for the U.S. Senate. He lost in the primary against a MAGA candidate, Blake Masters, who was endorsed by President Trump. So the Attorney General went on 60 Minutes in October and basically said that all of us who worry about the integrity of the election are crazy, and all these MAGA people are crazy. And so he's completely checked out, to the point that I've been receiving emails from some people, vicariously from people from his office, who have noticed basic violations of Arizona law. But the Attorney General, who's supposed to enforce the law, would rather go on 60 Minutes than enforce the statutes.
Cleta, look, there's a long history of election fraud in America. I think this idea of election deniers, anybody's question, is ridiculous, and it's some kind of gaslighting. I want to very quickly, we've got a few more minutes. In the places where it's legal, ballot harvesting, get out the early vote, all of these policies conservatives don't really like. Do you think the GOP needs to adopt these policies in order to win?
Look, last year in 2021, ballot harvesting in Virginia is legal, and their elections last year, and I had the head of a conservative group of pastors ask me, is it true that ballot harvesting is legal? I said, yes. He said, well, I guess we should do that. I said, yes, you should. Wow. Where it's legal, what I don't want to see us think that we need to cheat to win. I hope that's not the case, but we definitely need to read and understand the process and use the rules to advance our policies, our positions, our philosophies, and our candidates.
Are you integrating this education, for want of a better word, in your efforts?
Well, look, I'm about enhancing the statutes, strengthening the statutes. I'm not a political, I've done that in my other life. I'm spending full time today trying to strengthen and shore up the integrity of our elections. But I'm happy to explain to anyone and teach anyone that they need to study. In fact, we're going to publish, by the way, on our website, whoscounting.us. That's our website, whoscounting.us. We're going to post, by the way, we're going to start a landing page tomorrow on Maricopa County. So go to our website. You'll see all these amazing stories that people are telling. But we're going to tell people how to analyze the situation in their states, about how their elections are run, who runs them. These are basic things that conservatives never look at. And we're trying to educate people, and we'll do a video, we'll train people. You go to our website, we'll train you. We'll tell you how you can know more about what's going on in your state.
Well, Cleta Mitchell, I think we need to at least restore the faith in the process. Whoever wins, as long as we believe in it. Cleta Mitchell, Conservative Partner Institute. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And still to come after the break. Stay with us. With Congressman Andy Biggs join us to discuss his latest bid to challenge House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to become the House Speaker. That's coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Kevin McCarthy has a challenger for House Speaker, although you could call it an outside chance. Andy Biggs, congressman from Arizona, isn't happy with the GO's performance in the recent elections. Of course, McCarthy was the House Minority Leader at the time. After the unexpected results, Republicans who were hoping to win larger gains in Congress have indicated maybe there's a need for new leadership. Biggs had previously indicated a lack of confidence in McCarthy's ability to lead, noting that, quote, he's backpedaled on things like impeachment, which Biggs says indicates a willingness to weakening oversight authority that we need to have and the leverage points we need to have in order to deal with a Democrat president. But it'll be an uphill battle in January when the decision is made officially in a secret ballot this week. McCarthy won easily, 188 votes to 31. It's not a done deal yet, though. This was an informal vote. We talked to Rep. Biggs just a moment ago. Congressman Andy Biggs, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me with you.
So, Congressman, what would you offer the GOP as Speaker that Mr. McCarthy would not?
There's a number of things. First of all, organizationally, we would try to decentralize the power away from the Speaker's office and move it to the hands of more of our colleagues who have representatives. You know, they all represent 750,000 people, roughly that number. And I would try to spread that power out and that communication base out. So organizationally, we do that with some rules and processes. We would change the appropriations process so that for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years, we'd actually go through the normal budget process to get that going. So we would deal with that. We would actually open up so we can amend bills. We actually haven't had an open amendment process on the floor of the House for 6 years, if you can believe that. And it goes back in both Democrat and Republican administrations. So that's just a process issue. The next thing I would say is we would use leverage points to try to slow down the Biden administration and also try to escalate our effort to get positive pro-America first policy through. So you would use different legislation. One example I often use is the National Defense Authorization Act. We let that thing go through even though there weren't enough Democrat votes to get it. We had leverage points over it, and instead of using the leverage points, we allowed all this woke stuff in the military bill, authorization bill, to go through. We even allowed a crazy bill dealing with banking for marijuana dispensaries. Why would you allow that to go through a Defense Authorization Act? I'll never know, but that you would see that kind of thing from me to stop that.
On the decentralization point, is this possible to do given how we're just voting by party lines, really, and the majority in the House is going to be so slim? Is it possible to spread this power out, Congressman?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, one of the ways you do that is you're going to allow amendments, and you're going to actually allow Appropriations Committee to do its work. Then you're going to also use investigations, and so you're going to have that. But I think people don't realize how close the Republican Party is on policy issues. So, for instance, when I talk to some people who are on the other spectrum of the Republican Party, they feel the same way that I do about things like you have to fix Title IX to prevent men from getting into women's locker rooms and women's sports. You have to build a fence. You have to stop to make sure you have border security. You have to start reducing spending. You have to get to the bottom of how COVID came to be, and we agree on those things.
Are you going to run that investigation, Congressman? Are you going to look into the lab?
Oh, absolutely. You bet we will. And that's what we'd do if I was the Speaker of the House, and we would delegate it to our great committee chairman like Jamie Comer, who has oversight, and Jim Jordan, who will chair Judiciary. those are the things I'm talking about. You would really get these things together and unite the conference.
That investigation, what has been the holdup? Why we're all wondering where it came from? It seems to be just swept under the rug.
Well, the Democrats control the investigative apparatus of the United States Congress. Off campus, I've held a hearing dealing with that issue, but we need the imprimatur of bringing witnesses in with subpoenas and getting the bottom of the line and getting the administration to come in. They won't come in because the Democrats won't hold those hearings. Democrats have held no hearings with regard to anything of real substance, such as how did COVID get started? Who do we hold accountable? How about water, the issues in the West? How about energy and oil and gas? They won't do any of that stuff.
And I think the American people, they want to see these investigations. Congressman, I just have about a minute. How confident are you? There was a secret ballot. McCarthy did come out quite on top. You still feeling confident?
I'm feeling confident that he doesn't have 218 votes, and I don't know that he'll ever get 218 votes. And without that, then, if it's not me and somebody comes out who's a more consensus candidate than me, hey, I'll step aside. I'm happy to do that. The key is to get somebody who will really put this conference back together and spread that authority to members of the conference.
You weren't happy with Mr. McCarthy over the election results. Why exactly? What's to blame there on the speaker or the minority leader? Apologies.
Well, I've never really gone after Mr. McCarthy. I'm just suggesting that the status quo is not acceptable to me or the American people. There's no place I went where people said, well, let's just keep doing things the same way we've always done them and hope that we get something different. I think American people say, let's do things differently. Let's produce a more positive outcome for the American people, and let's get this country back on the right track. And I just think that starts at the top of the House of Representatives and the top of the Senate.
We'll be watching very closely. Congressman Andy Biggs, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And coming up after the break, Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S. China Tech War, joins us to discuss how TikTok, big social media app here in the States, can be used by the Chinese Communist Party to influence our elections, the midterm elections. It's coming up after the break. Welcome back. Young people overwhelmingly voted Democrat in the midterms. Well, that's if you trust the exit polls. Hard to trust any polls these days. But anyway, that's what the polls said. You know what else young people like, apart from the Dems? TikTok. The Chinese-owned app is the most popular social media platform in America. And this election cycle, they got into elections big style. They promised to police election misinformation. Who would decide what's true and false? That's hard to tell, really. It also launched an election center that encouraged people to get out the vote and gave them information on candidates. How much influence does the Chinese Communist Party have on these initiatives? Well, we know there are deep connections between TikTok's parent company and Chinese state media. Also, all businesses in China are lawfully obliged to report to and share data with the CCP. I spoke with China expert Gordon Chang about the threat. So with us now to discuss is Gordon Chang, Senior Fellow with the Gatestone Institute and also the author of The Great U.S. China Tech War. Gordon, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Gordon, is this the largest influence operation ever used against the United States?
Well, certainly. China uses many tools. TikTok is now, in some sense, the most important because it has such wide reach in the United States. And we know that Beijing uses TikTok to disseminate its propaganda lines. And it's been doing this for quite some time. And we Americans have a political system that is not defending us.
What do we know so far about this midterm cycle? Because TikTok implemented a lot of new things if you consider their policing of misinformation, their election center. Is it too early to tell, or do you have some insights for us?
Well, it's probably, the people are going to have to do some metrics on this. But we know what Beijing has been doing in the past. We know that it has been trying to create division in the United States, glorifying drug use, fomenting violence on American streets. So we can be pretty sure that they were up to no good in the midterms. There was the get out the vote element. This was certainly to help candidates who were not in a view to oppose China's regime. So this is going to be something we're going to learn more about. But, Paul, as we've learned more about TikTok in the past, it has become more and more sinister looking.
Oh, Gordon, on that point about China perhaps choosing the candidates we would want, after 2016, we were bombarded nonstop with panic about foreign interference in our elections. And in the end, it turns out we're told it was a dozen Russians in their basement or whatever. But yet, we even have political lawmakers and candidates on both parties campaigning on TikTok. This is incredible.
Yes, and the Democratic Party has specifically chosen TikTok to disseminate its themes. So this is, a clear use by one side of TikTok. But, it doesn't matter which side did it. The point is that TikTok now is extremely influential, and we know that it has been undermining U.S. national security in critical ways. So regardless of whether it helps one party or not, TikTok should not be allowed in the U.S. And Paul, one other thing, American apps are banned in China. So why are we allowing Chinese apps in our country? This is just a simple element of reciprocity. Even if TikTok were not illegally surveilling Americans, even if it were not disseminating Communist Party propaganda, for that reason alone of reciprocity, it should not be in our country.
It's just incredible, Gordon. We have one person, at least in D.C., FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. He's called for banning it. It's just a shame the power doesn't lie with the FCC. It's with the FTC, unfortunately. But do you see any chance of President Trump's plan of banning the app to perhaps be resurrected at some point in the future?
Well, of course, there could be a new president in 2024, but also even before that. The evidence against TikTok is now overwhelming. And at some point, there could be pressure, especially if there is a change in control in the House of Representatives. So this is something the American people have got to continue to pressure their representatives, because they're not going to do it on their own. It's got to be from the bottom up.
I think an interesting point, as we mentioned, so many young people are on TikTok. They tended to vote Democrat if you go by the exit polls. We saw President Biden forgiving student loan debt right up in the run-up to the election, you could say, for whatever reason, right? Would it hurt the party in charge with young voters if they were to ban the app, considering how popular it is?
Yes, certainly. As I mentioned, the Democratic Party has specifically used TikTok. And so, yes, it would hurt the Democrats.
What do you think, Gordon, while I have you here? We saw President Biden and Xi Jinping meeting this week. We didn't get so much information from the meeting, as happens. One thing that wasn't talked about, at least communicated to us, was human rights. Didn't seem to be brought up publicly from what I saw. What did you take away from this?
Yeah, it is important what wasn't mentioned. COVID wasn't mentioned. Fentanyl was not mentioned. There was some mention of quote-unquote human rights, but really what should have been on the discussion is something more important, and that is genocide and crimes against humanity. So this is well beyond the notion of human rights. This is the worst crimes that the world has witnessed since the Second World War.
You and I, Gordon, have been following China for a long time. I think it was a very lonely battle for a while. I think really until President Trump came in 2016, he was the first major, global figure to actually call China out, push back on China. I think he inspired a lot of people in Australia with Scott Morrison speaking out, to a lesser extent, maybe Boris Johnson in the UK at the time. How's your sense for the global kind of sentiment towards the Chinese Communist Party this year and going forward?
Well, certainly among Western countries and the allies and friends and partners of the West, there is a new appreciation of China. And even in the global South, there are many voices, not government voices, but there are popular voices against China, what it's been doing in those countries. So there is a new appreciation of the threat that China poses. And this is thanks to Xi Jinping. The Wolf Warrior diplomacy and other things that they've been doing is pushing leaders to recognize that they have to defend themselves against a militant Chinese regime.
Increasingly belligerent as well. Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute. Thank you, Gordon, as always. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Paul.
And coming up after the break, China and the United States have just resumed climate talks. Can you believe that? Justin Danhoff, head of corporate governance at Strive Asset Managers, joins us to discuss this, as well as what our global leaders are up to at the latest G20 summit. Welcome back. Despite the Chinese Communist Party threat, would you believe that China and the United States have just resumed climate talks? I can hear you at home saying, yes, I do believe it, unfortunately. The CCP is a murderous regime carrying out genocide against its own people. Do you think it really cares about the climate? It's building new coal plants like they're going out of fashion. China, though, stands to gain a lot by the U.S. shackling itself with climate policies. Just recently, the U.S. made it cheaper to import solar panels from China. So much for bringing manufacturing home. The CCP is hoodwinking the United States in its talks. Very simple. It will only end bad for America, but this trend is everywhere, even within America too. ESG, environmental, social, and governance policies. I'm sure you've heard about it. And joining us now to discuss this is Justin Danhoff, head of corporate governance at Strive Asset Management. Justin, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, it's nice to talk with you, Paul.
Justin, what do you think about what we're seeing here with more cooperation between the U.S. and China on the climate?
I mean, we are getting played for the sucker that we deserve to be, frankly. When it comes to the issue of ESG, you're right to note that many American businesses have had shackles of ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance restraints put around their ankles, while the CCP laughs at us, as you rightly pointed out, continues to build coal-fired power plants one after the other, while U.S. consumers continue to suffer both the results of the regulatory state, but also the asset management class in the United States of America that is really one of the driving forces behind this push for ESG at American businesses.
So in the United States, Justin, there seems to have been a backlash against ESG, particularly among conservatives. Has it had an impact with the powers that be, for want of a better phrase?
It's interesting because if you look at the powers that be, right, BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard that can collectively control about $20 trillion in assets under management, they have made a push to give the shareholder vote back to the actual owners of capital. And we think that that's an important step in recognizing that they've gotten too far out over their skis. But they can't walk their commitments on ESG all the way back because they've made commitments to states like California and New York and Norges Bank, whereby they have to live up to certain ESG commitments. And look, they still go speak at the Clinton Global Initiative, the World Economic Forum, and they are doing the bidding of the Davos crowd here in the United States of America. And it's quite interesting to note, too, that as the G20 is going on and Xi and President Biden are talking, who else has a big, big microphone there? None other than Klaus Schwab, yes, the leader of the World Economic Forum. I'm sorry, but the World Economic Forum is not a G20 country. Why does he have a megaphone there to direct action specifically on ESG, climate in particular? It's an interesting question that deserves a better answer.
I think so, Justin. Can you explain that? Because I think for a long time, you talk about World Economic Forum. New York Times had an article, conspiracy theorists talk about World Economic Forum. It's nothing. Whereas at the same time, they say this stuff on their website. He's at the G20 speaking to the leaders. Can you enlighten us a little bit of what exactly is going on here?
Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right that the mainstream media, they gaslit the American public on this issue all along, the power that the World Economic Forum holds, especially over nations that are poorer countries that are trying to increase their energy output, right? The World Economic Forum is saying, yeah, we'll give you loans. The World Bank, the same thing, will give you loans, but conditioned on the fact that you use clean energy or alternative energy in your energy loads, which is, of course, not how developing nations are actually going to deliver to their citizens. So it's really sad to see. And again, what is the World Economic Forum saying about China and India, who are developing coal-fired power plants at rapid paces? Precious little. So the hypocrisy that reigns at BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard also rings true at the World Economic Forum.
It's just been incredible to watch. Here in the States, like, who has the power? Who are you speaking with, or who should advocates be speaking with to try and counter this trend and kind of keep the power with the people?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of important points to note. First of all, American investors have both a voice and a vote that they're not using, right? Thousands of votes are pulled on a lever every single year that don't happen in November. They happen at annual shareholder meetings of publicly traded companies. And the data shows that retail investors, that's individual investors, at many companies vote at less than a 40% clip. So there's a huge gap of investors that aren't using their vote to influence corporate America's decision making. And that only amplifies the institutional investor vote. That is the vote of the large asset managers such as BlackRock. And so individuals have a lot more to do in the franchise, in the voting arena, but also in the voice arena. Believe it or not, Paul, if you want to go to an annual shareholder meeting of a publicly traded company in the United States of America, you need to own only a single share. So if you want to talk to the CEO of Coca-Cola because you don't agree with the company's policies, telling their employees to be less white, for example, all you need is about $48 last I checked. And so I think that there's this voice and vote gap that corporate America is only hearing from pro-ESG advocates, and they're not hearing from enough pro-fiduciary advocates.
I can hear our viewers typing furiously on their keyboards trying to buy those stocks. Justin Danhoff, Strive Asset Management, we appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
ESG, it's been here for a while. I always feel that it's kind of jargony, right? A little bit like CRT. It takes a while to get one's head around, but once you actually discover what it is, it's really frightening. It's using climate, using this idea of climate change to completely decide where the money should get invested, how the society should develop, how the economy should develop, and who exactly is making decisions. Like Mr. Danhoff said, massive money managers, the World Economic Forum, world leaders, perhaps unelected ones if you take Europe. And so I think what Mr. Danhoff is saying, get the education out. What exactly does this mean behind the jargon, and help people to realize this is really not a good thing for America, particularly as it benefits the Chinese Communist Party. Great to see you all this evening. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. We'll be back again on Wednesday. This is Newsmakers, production by NTD Television and the Epoch Times. It's been great to see you. I'm Paul Graney. Have a great night.